Some channels have a laser focus on a tiny niche. At Perchance to Read, the scope is broadened just a bit. Welcome to this sampler showcasing a selection of the channel's videos. What's on the menu? Well, at Perchance to Read, the possibilities for literary exploration are endless, ensuring that every reader finds something to spark their interest and imagination. But while our first love is books, Perchance to Read is not limited to book reviews alone. Recognizing the growing interest in law, true crime, and legal dramas, the channel has introduced a legal series that dives into legal terms, court terminology, and vintage true crime narratives. The legal series on Perchance to Read is designed to cater to both novices and seasoned enthusiasts of the genre, without, however, giving any legal advice. Strictly for entertainment, each episode covers different aspects of the legal world, from understanding complex terminologies to unraveling historical true crime cases that have shaped the legal landscape. This series aims to chat with viewers about the intricacies of the legal system while keeping them engaged with fascinating stories from the past. One of the highlights of the legal series is the focus on vintage true crime narratives. These stories, often forgotten in the annals of history, are brought to life with meticulous research and engaging storytelling. Whether it's a notorious case that shook the foundations of society or a lesser-known crime that had significant implications, Perchance to Read ensures that these tales are told with the respect and attention they deserve. Perchance to Read also sheds light on the vibrant city of Los Angeles, where this narrator was born, on Sunset Boulevard, in fact. But as our videos will reveal, I've also lived and worked in many places in the world and can offer real comparisons between LA and other cities and towns one might consider as a place to settle. And not just about food or transportation, but about deeper lifestyle issues like community, loneliness, homelessness, healthcare, accessibility, activity, and living your best life at whatever age. It means for those considering a move to the bustling metropolis that is Los Angeles, the channel offers insightful content about life in LA. From its diverse neighborhoods to cultural hotspots, Perchance to Read provides a guide to help newcomers navigate and appreciate the city's unique charm. Los Angeles is known for its eclectic mix of neighborhoods, each with its own distinct personality and atmosphere. Perchance to Read takes viewers on a journey through these areas, highlighting the key features, amenities, and local culture that make each neighborhood special. Whether you prefer the bohemian vibe of Venice Beach, the upscale allure of Beverly Hills, or the artistic flair of Silver Lake, there's something for everyone in LA. In addition to neighborhood guides, Perchance to Read covers various cultural hotspots and events in Los Angeles. From world-renowned museums and galleries to music festivals and food fairs, the channel provides a comprehensive look at the dynamic cultural scene in the city. Whether you're a tourist or a resident, these insights can help you make the most of your time in LA. So if you're a book lover, a legal story enthusiast, or someone interested in learning more about life in Los Angeles, Perchance to Read is your channel. We strive to create content that resonates with our diverse audience, offering a little something for everyone. Many of our playlists are also conveniently available as podcasts right here on YouTube, with that availability soon to expand, so please check your favorite destination for podcasts to see if Perchance to Read is there. And as always, if you find something here on the channel that resonates with you, please like, share, and subscribe. Join our community and embark on a journey of literary exploration, legal education, and cultural discovery. Here we go! Planning to retire in Los Angeles? Here's one thing you need to know from a native Angelino. As I've said in other videos in this series, I know I sound a bit ridiculous thinking people will come to LA to retire, a city with a reputation for having an excessive cost of living, earthquakes, and fires. It's counterintuitive for us to even be talking, but not so fast. People really do regularly flock here every year, at every age, and at every level of income. As for my credentials, I'm an inadvertent expert on LA and comparing it to other cities and towns around the world. On the one hand, I was born in a hospital on Sunset Boulevard and have spent a good chunk of my life in LA. But I've also been lucky enough to have lived and worked in a lot of other places and to have traveled extensively around Europe and North America. Too many places, jobs, cities, towns, trains, transatlantic boats, and planes to name. When I started my work and family life, I ended up doing it overseas as a civilian. I wasn't on the fringes as a vacationer or tourist, although that would have been just fine. But because I was enmeshed in the culture, I really participated in the places I lived as an employee, a parent, a neighbor, a medical patient, a hair salon client, a grocery shopper, and a tenant, to name just a few of my roles while I was living my young life overseas. I guess you could say I was an expat, although not really because I didn't expatriate. I was simply living and working overseas on the front end of my working life instead of as a retiree, a stranger in many unfamiliar places. It wasn't lofty, it was average young life. And that's my point. Most retirees are not lofty. They're looking for a comfortable, normal life in their second youth, likely on a fixed income. My long through line of a life and career includes decades in LA that I can compare to a bunch of other places. And here's an observation from a well-traveled LA native for any would-be Angelino. A car is necessary from day one. Historically, Los Angeles has been designed for driving, even when there were fewer cars on the road. I wish I had better news, but if you want to retire in LA, don't be surprised if you have to add buying or maintaining a car to your budget. But hang on a second. As I break this down, consider these issues as you evaluate whether other cities you're considering for retirement have similar concerns. But back to LA, if you were planning on offloading your car in retirement, it's likely not going to happen if you retire in Los Angeles. I know LA's crowded freeways and boulevards are famous, and this probably doesn't seem like news, but I think people still think that with LA being such a ginormous city, there must be a way to get around without a car on a regular basis, and conveniently. Like, surely only people competing in the rat race are on that freeway, right? Wrong. We definitely have a metro system and buses galore, and all of the above are extremely accessible for individuals using mobility devices, but metaphorically, if public transit is a rainstorm, many places in the city are sitting between the raindrops, staying dry and underserved. There are lots of places in LA that a bus or a train never reaches. If you need to travel to 2 destinations in a day, public transportation may not be feasible unless one trip is to work and the other is home. And that's mostly whom you'll see on public transportation in Los Angeles. Commuters at the beginning and end of the day. Whereas in cities I've lived in around the world, public transportation was used by people headed to thousands of places for 1,000 reasons all day long. That included me. For most of the time I lived overseas, I used public transportation even after I became a parent. I did eventually have a car, but I didn't always use it or need it. In Los Angeles, if you want to run errands, search for a house or an apartment, visit the beach, attend a concert, shop for groceries, take your pet to the vet, catch a movie, or go to a mall, having a car is necessary to efficiently visit multiple locations in one day. Unfortunately, bicycles aren't a reliable option either. This is because the city is too spread out, with most pathways designed for too many millions of vehicles for there to be a robust bicycle culture. There just isn't a way for bicycles to share the road with this many cars the way bicycles have equal say in other cities. Scooters thrive in flat, narrow downtown LA, where there are also metro bikes available, but just a fraction of what you'll be doing will occur in downtown. You might not see downtown for weeks or months. Or you may visit downtown for a concert or a play or some great food, but you'll be too far away from everywhere else to bike or bus or take a train to the next place. And it doesn't help that the city is kind of hilly. So anywhere you go, you are potentially going to encounter a steep hill that's not designed for pedestrians or bicyclists. In the end, the distance or desolate roads between any 2 points will get in your way. I mean, in New York City, you can wear the highest fashion to the theater and walk or catch a quick cab to a restaurant after the show. In LA, you may have to walk to a remote parking lot that leads to just a few random surface streets that take you to the freeway on-ramp. Walking is basically out, as is hopping on your bicycle in your evening wear. Ride shares can be useful if you need a designated driver, if your car won't start and you need to quickly get to a scheduled event, or if friends in various parts of the city need to get home separately after an event. However, ride shares aren't practical for regular use over extended periods in a city this size. Relying on ride shares may not always be convenient or safe, especially depending on the location where you need to wait for your ride. Furthermore, considering the frequency of rideshare usage that would be necessary, a small car payment could be cheaper. This means when you land in LA, from the minute you check into your hotel or other lodgings, you'll be essentially stranded if you don't have a car. If you want to live here, it's likely that no matter how long you hold out, and long could just be a few days or even hours, I'm not kidding, you'll fold and get a car. And while there's lots of talk brewing about how in preparation for the 2028 Olympics, LA plans to convert to being a more bicycle-friendly city, with more buses and trains added everywhere, some possibly running 24 hours a day even, that's still a ways away at the time of this recording, and there are no guarantees right now that measures implemented by then will remain after the Olympics. I'm sure some of them will survive, but we don't know yet the breadth of the plans and the sustainability of what's planned. So when you're putting together your retirement or relocation budget, a car will likely be high on the list of things you'll expect to buy or maintain, barring drastically different signals that make it clear needing a car is no longer the case. Don't count a car out, count it in. Hi, if you know my channel, you know my videos on Los Angeles are from the perspective of a native Angelino who spent a good chunk of my time in my younger years living and working overseas. Drawing on those experiences, I'm able to make solid comparisons about life in LA versus life elsewhere as I break down one aspect per video about LA life for people considering relocating to LA. My topic this time is unique to LA for sure. We all know the saying, it's a nice place to visit, but I wouldn't want to live there. Well, Angelinos know it's kind of hard to explain LA's charm because we turn that saying on its head. LA is a wonderful place to live, but I wouldn't necessarily want to visit here. I personally spend a lot of time downtown, and when I see tourists, I think, what could they possibly be visiting? They must be so bored. I feel bad. I wish I could have told them to skip LA and go straight to San Francisco or Redwood City or Carmel. As a native of this town, I truly feel guilty for not having enough to offer whenever I see tourists in LA. Like I want to somehow give them back their money. Why? Because life in Los Angeles is so spread out. This is just a tiny sliver of the whole city, I'm not kidding. And here's the other side of that downtown skyline showing just a small portion of East LA. Los Angeles has never been small in scope or scale. The overwhelming size and layout means the average short-term visitor just won't get to experience the lifestyle and the reason Angelinos love living here. There's no way to drive around and see it all and really live it in just a few days. It's more like an attitude that permeates your life over the course of several months to a year, 2 years, or a lifetime. And it's sort of always been the same. After a while, you appreciate LA's flip-flops and shades personality. Sure, a tourist will feel the weather, find great food, maybe rent a car and drive to the spot where you can hike up to the Hollywood sign, or swing through a theme park, or visit a movie studio. But LA is mostly an events-driven city. You catch a Lakers, Clippers, Dodgers, Angels, Kings, Rams, or Chargers game, or a UCLA or USC game. You watch LeBron play. You watch Ohtani hit, or steal a base. You attend a book fair or a pride festival or a vintage car show or an air show. You shop at a farmer's market and do lunch at a beach cafe. Or you take surfing classes. Or you hike the many mountain ranges that run through the city, and you sometimes drive for just an hour and spend the day skiing. I went to college smack dab in the middle of Los Angeles with kids who brought their skis to class in January or their surfboards in May. As soon as class let out, they headed for the slopes or the waves. Maybe you go to a movie your friend worked on as a gaffer or a grip, or a digital artist or a costumer or an extra. Maybe you were in the film as an extra. Or you go to a screening of a film that may have the director or a lead actor in attendance, giving an in-depth interview about their work before or after the film. Or you attend a 3-day film festival centered around a tiny niche that can still pack the theaters for those 3 days. Or you go to a museum or the opera or to hear and see the LA Philharmonic dazzle the audience in the Frank Gehry designed Walt Disney Concert Hall, or you grab a meal at one of our zillion fantastic restaurants, whether you want Korean, or Ethiopian, or Armenian, or Mexican, or Greek, or Filipino, or American diner, or too many other kinds of delicious cultural fare to name here. The point is, cities all over the world and all over America have many of these same activities available, but none of them has all of these things the way Los Angeles does. Skiing, theme parks, the Hollywood sign, the movie industry, surfing, golfing, dining, hiking, all within reachable driving distance. And for the cities that are jam-packed with tons to do, they're more concentrated such that even a tourist could do a lot of things in one city within a shorter period of time and say it was a beautiful place to visit. 1 week in New York could easily mean more than one Broadway show, museums, great food, a sporting event, hanging in Central Park, going to Grand Central Station, visiting the Empire State Building, and ferrying out to the Statue of Liberty and touring your favorite Law and Order locations. You could do all of that without a car and within 1 week and be thrilled with your visit. Paris is the same. You can see the Mona Lisa, Whistler's Mother, the Eiffel Tower, the Arc de Triomphe, and Notre Dame, and eat really, really well in the same day, let alone the same week. And I didn't even mention the Champs-Élysées. In other cities, when you're engaged in one activity, you can kind of see many of the other activities. You leave a theater and there's a cafe. LA doesn't behave that way. You leave Griffith Park and you get in your car and drive several miles to the place you want to eat. Arguably, you'll never see all of what any huge city has to offer. But you can visit many famous cities for a week and pack in the top 10 greats without a car and feel like even though there was a lifetime of things you didn't get to see, you still had a fabulous visit that was well worth your time. That same week in LA would have you driving all over town to do just a few things with, as I said, the beach, mountains, skiing, surfing, golfing, several theme parks, movie studio visits, and Hollywood sign activities thrown in. And to boot, you'll be stuck in a lot of traffic somewhere along the way. It means you could end up frustrated at all of what's on the city's menu and how little of it you actually got to eat by the time your vacation ends. A lot will be left off your list after what I think could be kind of a boring visit. And our greats are not all that obvious. We have no Eiffel Tower, no Empire State Building, or Broadway or Times Square, no London Bridge, no Colosseum, no Mount Kilimanjaro, no safaris, no pyramids, no Taj Mahal. Our one monument, other than the Hollywood sign, sort of the Walk of Fame, and kind of the Capitol Records building in the Santa Monica Pier, is the lifestyle. That's really our Eiffel Tower, the lifestyle. But how do you visit a lifestyle? You have to live it. But over the course of a year, or a happy, healthy retirement, with our great weather and tons of options for any personality type, serene beaches and mountains, bustling downtown, golf courses, museums, movies, malls, and material comforts, the sum total of the experience makes LA a wonderful place to live. If you retire here, you'll have lots to do as a local for years and years and years. It will take a long time before you've been everywhere and tried everything and are now bored. And with LAX nearby, you can catch a flight to literally anywhere your whims can afford. Friends retired in faraway places can reach you easily. Your children and grandchildren can pop in. Hawaii is just a 5-hour flight away. LA, a nice place to live, even if I'm not always sure it's a great place to visit. Hi, I have something fun today for readers and would-be Angelinos. It's the perfect combination of books, film noir, and the city of LA. Check it out. It's this nifty Raymond Chandler map of Los Angeles, a guide to the usual and unusual that takes you on a book-by-book tour through Los Angeles using sights and scenes from Raymond Chandler's novels, like The Big Sleep and The Lady in the Lake, and Farewell, My Lovely, as the primary landmarks and attractions. I've done plenty of book reviews, but I never thought I'd do a review of a map that's based on books, but here we happily are. And what a treat this map is, even for locals. The authors of the Raymond Chandler map of Los Angeles have brilliantly and expertly combed through Chandler's novels and matched up book locations visited by fictional gumshoe Philip Marlowe as he navigates the city's treacherous underbelly, and they've provided factual and wonderful historical information about each location, including whether you can access it today and what its current use is. They've also added locations unique to films based on Chandler's books, and locations from Chandler's personal life, including his film writing life, which leads to other film noir locations based on Chandler's screenwriting and other Hollywood life. In all, the map showcases 50 locations, including bars, jazz clubs, executive suites, beaches, mansions, old-fashioned department stores, and alleyways that inspired Chandler or drove or haunted Philip Marlowe. For example, the map will take you to Greystone Mansion, which, the map tells us, inspired the fictional Sternwood compound of The Big Sleep, where Philip Marlowe runs headlong into murder and deceit. You'll step into Murder My Suite and swing by fictional Jules Amthor's penthouse at 8358 Sunset Boulevard, also known as the Sunset Towers, a real-life swank Art Deco hotel on the Sunset Strip. In Farewell My Lovely, Philip Marlowe's search for a missing person pulls him into Los Angeles' dark side along the Pacific Coast Highway and takes you to the streets of Bay City, a fictional representation of Santa Monica. Use the map to take a drive along the coast to real-life actor Thelma Todd's Sidewalk Cafe, the place of the actor's mysterious death at the age of 29 in 1935, as you follow Marlowe on his beachfront investigations. As an aside, it's hard to believe Thelma Todd was only 29 when she died. When I was much younger, that seemed older because she had died so long ago, but now, at this age, I have better perspective and can't believe how far she had come in her life to nevertheless die so young. The map also points out Farewell My Lovely's Belvedere Beach Club, inspired by the real-life Bel Air Bay Club, where you can see here real-life actor Janet Chandler enjoying the club's beach in 1935. I don't want to spoil the map's goodies, so I'll just say that in all, the map takes you through Raymond Chandler's The Big Sleep, Farewell My Lovely, The High Window, The Lady in the Lake, The Little Sister, The Long Goodbye, and Playback. Plus, as I mentioned, films noir and places of import in Chandler's real life. 50 locations, and I've only touched on a few. Just in case you're doubting a map could be this fun, because if we're honest, needing a map can mean we're lost more than it can signal we're on an adventure. It depends on where you are and what you're looking for. As you unfold the Raymond Chandler map of Los Angeles, you'll immediately be taken with the artsy vintage visuals that transport you into your favorite films and books noir. You're definitely on a fun adventure with this map, no question. The sepia tones, the font choices, the illustrations, and the actual street map, the map itself, make you feel as though you're standing in LA of the 1940s and opened a map inside a movie to make your way around town and maybe meet Philip Marlowe in a nightclub. It's an immersive experience that constantly reminds you of Raymond Chandler's world. The map is authored by a novelist and true crime tour guide who is an expert in LA's history and lost lore, and a native Angelino illustrator with decades-long history of tracking down Raymond Chandler locations. Their expertise shows. As you know, I'm a native Angelino, born on Sunset Boulevard, and I spent a great deal of time, years in fact, in one of the 50 locations highlighted on this map. And I still learned tons from this map of Raymond Chandler treasures. I'm not, repeat not, an Amazon affiliate or a sponsor for this map. I just dig it, and it fits my channel, so I thought I'd recommend it. But I'll share that at the time of this recording, you can order the map on Amazon or do what I did and support the Los Angeles Public Library by stopping in at the gift shop in the downtown branch, aka the Central Branch, aka the Mothership, and my all-time favorite place on earth, and picking up your copy there. I'm guessing it's available in many other places, just mentioning the two places I know about. Wherever you find it, happy touring.
Come closer. I want to talk to you. I'm going to tell you an astounding story.
Greetings from the true crime wing of Perchance to Read. I've got a rare underground story of the true crimes of a Los Angeles summer in 1945 that mysteriously went on for over a year that I'm going to tell you about. So yes, although it's rarely talked about, this true crime spree caught the attention of Hollywood, and they made the 1948 cult noir classic He Walked by Night based on this spree. From Eagle Lion Films, He Walked by Night stars Richard Basehart, Whit Bissell, and a cast of actors who weren't household names, and I'll explain why that is in a moment. It actually makes a lot of sense. Like any movie based on fact, He Walked by Night takes artistic license as it depicts these true crimes, so happily this video is not a big fat spoiler for this fantastic movie. Let's get right to it. So we know old Hollywood, bubbling up as a new industry with fresh stories flowing, still scoured books, short stories, and magazine articles for ideas they turned into some of the best movies ever. They even hired famous writers to gin up great scripts. Occasionally, though, they ripped the stories right from the headlines even back then, and that's how one of the top, most culty noir films ever got made. As an art piece, the movie has everything you need in a 1940s noir: Los Angeles in the dark, dogged police, one or two tireless investigators, a solitary man on the run. So whose true crimes inspired He Walked by Night? Most people agree that his did. That's William Irwin Walker, aka Machine Gun Walker. On his end, he went by Irwin Walker. To be clear, before we go on, I'm neither glorifying nor judging Walker. Due Process had the final word on Walker, and I'll let those books stand. This is just a bit of history from 80 years ago, what happened and how it led to a film that, arguably, broke lots of ground for all modern police procedural films and television. If you enjoy Law & Order, CSI, NCIS, and the like, you can partially thank He Walked by Night. So back to the real life in the 1940s, what did Walker do to end up portrayed on the big screen by Richard Basehart? Well, in 1945, Walker was blending in well with Los Angeles society when he went on a year-and-a-half-long crime spree that started with rampant theft, selling stolen goods, and countless brazen robberies, and it ended in multiple shootings and a murder. He did it pretty much unchecked because, well, he blended in. And how he blended in is one for, apparently, the movies. So who is Walker? Well, by all available accounts, Walker had an average childhood. He was born in Glendale, California in 1917. If you know Glendale, you know it's a pleasant California neighborhood that's adjacent to Los Angeles. Most would say it's always been a lovely place to live. Check out this postcard from 1910 depicting Pasadena, which butts right up against Glendale. They're basically and arguably one big neighborhood. Eventually it turned into this. Walker's dad was a Los Angeles County flood control engineer, and his uncle was a prominent LA lawyer and chief deputy district attorney who eventually became a judge. Walker was interested in radio work and enjoyed sports. After he graduated high school, he spent a year at California Institute of Technology, aka Caltech. He then worked for the Glendale Police Department as a radio operator. It appears that at the time he lived with his parents and sister and was reportedly gentle, affectionate, and considerate, and was basically no bother to anyone. He seemed to be on a traditional path one might travel on their way to an ordinary life, maybe even an extraordinary one filled with rewards. So what happened? In 1941, Walker was still on a regular path. Remember, he didn't begin his crime spree until 1945. But in 1941, he joined the military and served as a lieutenant in the South Pacific during World War II. He was assigned to a group engaged in radar repair. The Army stationed him in Australia, but he eventually spent from June to November of 1944 on Wake Island. Most say that this is where his life took its first hard turn, because it was on Wake Island where Walker reportedly witnessed countless gruesome deaths and experienced prolonged exposure to broad-scale mortality. From Wake Island, Walker moved to Leyte Island, where he oversaw the safety of 85 men. One day he returned to his ship on orders and didn't post a guard detail for the men who remained behind. This proved to be a grave error. The next day, Walker left his ship and went back to the campsite and learned that many of his fellow servicemen had been killed in a surprise attack. His best friend survived the attack but was paralyzed from the neck down, although there's some confusion around this point because it appears at one point Walker was told his friend had died. But he also later reported having a conversation with this same friend sometime after the war. Even though Walker and others in charge on Leyte Island were cleared of any lapse in duty surrounding the attack, and Walker was reportedly well liked by the men who worked with him, He always blamed himself for the attack and his friend's injuries. Walker's mental processing of his friend's fate reportedly factored heavily into Walker's crimes. Not the friend himself, but just the way Walker handled or didn't handle well what happened. It added to his mental downward spiral. He spent 3 more days in battle, but he felt he was no longer fit to serve as an officer. The Army released him from active duty in December 1944 and sent him back to the States around March of 1945. So this is some footage of 1940s Burbank, another suburb adjacent to Los Angeles. Like Pasadena, from this postcard I showed you, Burbank also butts up against Glendale, where Walker grew up, and is so similar to Glendale the boundaries are pretty seamless. The architecture, the trees, and the landscaping are representative of a lot of LA suburbs. And I love how among all these long, wide streets there are no traffic lights and close to no stop signs. If you're watching this video at all, I assume you like vintage footage, so I'm just going to let this roll for a bit while I tell you what happened next with Walker. Also, while I love showing footage of historical places, I don't want to attempt to reenact Walker's crimes with footage that mimics real-life events. So I'll just keep 1940s Burbank, Glendale in the backdrop for a bit as I walk you through Walker's crime spree. And don't forget, He Walked by Night is out there for the viewing. I'll leave the dramatization to the experts. By July 1945, Walker was still on active duty in the Army and was even promoted. Remember, he was back home, but he was still in the Army. And his temperament had visibly changed after he left Leyte Island and returned to the States. He was about to kick his life of crime into gear, starting with nonviolent crimes. While he was still on active duty, and before that July 1945 promotion, Walker burglarized a garage and stole some tools, a voltmeter, and a radio tuner. By August 1945, again while still on active duty, he broke into an Army ordnance warehouse and stole 6 Thompson machine guns, 12 .45 automatics, 6 .38 revolvers, ammunition, holsters, and clips. The Army discharged Walker in November of 1945. Within a week, he stole an automobile, changed its license plates, and used the car to transfer some of the stolen goods. He stole amplifiers, electronic equipment, records, a projector, a recording turntable, a camera, and other equipment from record and film companies. Remember, it was Los Angeles, where the film and recording industries thrived, and this kind of equipment would have been everywhere in the city. And he never went back to his family. They said when he got home he was morose, taciturn, brooding, melancholy, secretive, and even rough with small children. He quit several jobs and turned down the chance to go back to his job with the Glendale Police Department, and he started carrying around a machine gun on a pretty regular basis. He operated out of a garage he rented and committed a dozen or so acts of burglary, armed robbery, and safe-cracking for property he later sold, which netted him $70,000 at the time, even while he still had other stolen property on hand. To give you an idea, that $70,000 would be $1,186,535 in 2023. Walker continued on his run of committing crimes, but by April 1946, the police were onto him. Based on what he was stealing and selling, all that recording and film equipment, they figured out the next place he planned to sell stolen goods and they staked it out. They turned out to be right. When Walker arrived to make the deal, 2 detectives confronted him. The confrontation erupted into a shootout. Walker wounded one officer and the other officer shot and wounded Walker. But Walker got away, even though he was shot. And how he got away is likely what grabbed Hollywood. Walker literally headed for the gutters in the street, squeezed into the opening for the storm drains, dropped into the drain, and ran for it through the tall labyrinth sewer system under Los Angeles. That's right, he ran through LA's sewers to get away. He made it far enough and knew his way around down there well enough to pop up and out somewhere else in the city, and he evaded capture. While the police presumably hoped to chase him down on the streets, knowing he was shot and wounded and couldn't move fast, he pushed ahead steadily for his life underground. He managed to make it home and tend to his gunshot wound on his own. By the way, the movie does a wonderful job with this bit of Walker's world. That alone makes it worth watching it. So Walker's first brush with dying for his crimes or getting caught was in April 1946 after that shootout with police. Fast forward a bit to the point of no return. In the early morning hours of June 5th, 1946, Walker, who was 28 years old by then and about to turn 29 in October, planned to rob a safe in a meat market at the corner of Los Feliz Boulevard and Brunswick Avenue in Glendale. In the process of scoping out the market, Walker cut the lock on the store, replaced it with his own lock, ditched the bolt cutter, and drove around the block a couple of times to see if anyone had spotted him, eventually retrieving the bolt cutter. At this point, the story hits a very wide fork in the road. Walker says while circling back to the store, he spotted someone in a car with a flashlight near where he had ditched the bolt cutter. According to Walker, the person called him to the car, and Walker approached the car on foot and recognized that the person behind the wheel was a police officer. The officer asked Walker for his identification and asked him why he was in the neighborhood. Walker said he was visiting his girlfriend and gently pulled out a .45 gun. The officer went for his gun, but Walker was faster and shot the officer twice. Walker claimed the officer asked him to call for help, and Walker said no. Walker also sort of implied that the officer shot at him first. So that was his version of events. The officer Walker shot was California Highway Patrol Officer Lauren Cornwell Roosevelt. The 43-year-old had once been the police chief in Arcadia, California, another Los Angeles adjacent city. He said while returning home in the early morning hours of June 5th, 1946, he spotted a car speeding on Los Feliz Boulevard and chased it. The car eventually slowed, and when Officer Roosevelt pulled alongside it, the driver of the other car, Walker, fired a gun multiple times. This aligns with Walker saying he circled the block to see if anyone had spotted him cutting the lock off the store. It's plausible and easy to imagine that he drove fast while making that circle in a rush each time to get back to the front of the store to see what went on. Meanwhile, remember how Walker said he shot Officer Roosevelt twice? The next day, the newspapers reported that Roosevelt had been hit by 9 .45 caliber bullets, making it likely, the reports said, this isn't my theory, that Walker opened fire on Roosevelt from his car with a Thompson machine gun, which supports Roosevelt's account. Where both stories are oddly substantiated is how Walker got away, which was, you guessed it, for the second time that we know of, Walker escaped a crime scene through the gutters, storm drains, and sewers of Los Angeles. In his own words, after he shot Roosevelt, he headed straight for the sewers, which means he abandoned at the scene the car he had been driving as he scoped out the store on Los Feliz Boulevard. Police found the car full of contraband, including a machine gun. So maybe Walker was on foot near the store or near his car and shot Officer Roosevelt twice after being called to Roosevelt's vehicle. Or maybe he had the rapid round shootout from his car and simply bailed out of the car after the shooting to head for the storm drains. Either way, neighbors heard the shooting and Roosevelt was rushed to the hospital where he later died, but after he gave his version of the events and described Walker to police. Officer Roosevelt's ability to give the description would prove to be Walker's undoing, but not for a while. Walker had killed Officer Roosevelt and escaped through the sewers and remained free, and now the police knew who they were looking for, or at least what he looked like. So what did Walker do with that reprieve? You might think he lay low as the storm drains and sewers. But no. From that June 1946 night through December 1946, Walker made more fake license plates, stole cars, and regularly robbed liquor stores. Remember how the June 1946 event with Officer Roosevelt would ultimately be Walker's undoing? Well, in December 1946, the police finally found Walker's apartment at 1831.5 North Argyle Avenue, an address that no longer exists because that stretch of Argyle is now an on-ramp for the famed 101/Hollywood freeway and surrounded by office buildings. But back in 1946, on December 20, 3 detectives raided Walker's apartment on Argyle Avenue at 2 a.m. Walker, surprised in his sleep by the raid, reached for his machine gun and managed to grab it. There was a struggle over the gun. An officer shot Walker twice in the shoulder, and that was the end of Walker's crime spree. He had used the sewers of Los Angeles, countless roads traveled in stolen cars, contraband cash, and the dark of night to hide, but they finally caught him in his own apartment. He had just turned 29 in October. As he was handcuffed, Walker reportedly said, "All right now, you have me. Do a good job." In Walker's apartment, the police found guns and license plates, and nearby were 3 cars he had stolen, including one outfitted with a machine gun on the driver's side. Walker also told the arresting officers that just a week earlier, 2 motorcycle patrol officers had stopped him on Hollywood Boulevard for a minor traffic violation and let him go. He ominously and chillingly talked as though they had narrowly missed not making it out of that encounter if they had recognized him and tried to detain him. The arresting officers took Walker to the hospital for the gunshot wounds to his shoulder, and along the way, Walker confessed to all his crimes. After Walker's arrest, his parents revealed that the family had a long history of mental illness. At his trial, Walker pleaded not guilty by reason of insanity, and his parents testified for him. The judge ultimately found him sane. He was found guilty of the murder of Officer Roosevelt and the attempted murder of the 2 officers who had staked out his stolen goods sale in April 1946, and with whom he had the shootout before he made his first escape through LA's sewers. He was sentenced to death for the murder of Officer Roosevelt and sent to San Quentin prison. After Walker exhausted his appeals in 1948, Walker's father committed suicide. Eventually, a psychiatrist diagnosed Walker with paranoid schizophrenia. Just 36 hours before his scheduled execution, Walker also attempted suicide. This led to a years-long postponement of his execution. He was sent to a maximum security mental hospital where he picked up the saxophone, and authorities labeled him a model prisoner. The hospital prison gave him privileges to walk around the prison guards, and using those privileges, he escaped. But authorities quickly recaptured him. Despite revoked privileges, he somehow re-established himself as a model prisoner, and the hospital prison allowed him to mentor younger delinquents. Later, the state transferred Walker back to state prison without warning. The governor commuted his death sentence to life imprisonment without the possibility of parole. Although Walker filed in the Supreme Court an unsuccessful petition for a writ of habeas corpus, the Supreme Court did strike the portion of Walker's sentence that denied him the possibility of parole. This meant parole was now possible for Walker. In 1974, at the age of 57, and after being incarcerated in some form for roughly 27 years, Walker was paroled. He reportedly immediately legally changed his name, likely an application in process before his parole was granted so that, if he was released on parole, he'd be ready on day 1 to begin life under a new name. It's just a hunch, but since a movie had been made about his criminal activity, he probably thought this was the only way to get a fresh start. He found a job as a chemist and disappeared into utter obscurity. We know close to nothing about his life after his 1974 release from prison. We do know, though, that he died in 2008, the day after he turned 91. He had been free for 34 years. If Walker's life reads a bit like a police procedural, Hollywood saw it that way too, which was rare for the time. When Eagle Lion Films made He Walked by Night, the company produced a film that focused on investigative techniques, which was unique for the time. But the lesser-known cast is what makes it work. It feels like a portrayal of real-life events because we don't see actors we recognize. As much as we love actors we know, the ability of a film with large players to achieve documentary overtones is much harder when we recognize the person who regularly plays characters in fictional stories. He Walked by Night rolls almost like a caught-on-tape movie. In some places, it even feels like we're watching security footage of a crime scene. The other bonus to the unknown cast and the docudrama style is that the movie includes Jack Webb of Dragnet fame, who was not well known in 1948, so he fit right in with the cast. In fact, his part in this film is somewhat small considering who he became career-wise. In He Walked by Night, you see the kernels of what would blossom into Jack Webb's trademark of always injecting a bit of the skeptic into his tone. By 1950, as an actor, he had made it into 3 well-regarded films in that year alone, including the excellent post-war film The Men, which starred Marlon Brando, the Elizabeth Scott noir Dark City, and famed Oscar-winning director Billy Wilder's Sunset Boulevard with a stellar A-list cast that included William Holden, yes, that William Holden, Gloria Swanson, Cecil B. DeMille, and more. And it turns out that being on the set and watching the police procedural aspect of the way Eagle Lion Films crafted He Walked by Night gave Webb the idea for Dragnet. That's right, his being in this movie is how we got Dragnet. Webb launched Dragnet on radio a year after He Walked by Night in 1949. Then came his big film year in 1950, followed by his co-directing the 1954 film version of Dragnet. And then there was the TV show Dragnet that ran for years. More broadly and less about the cast, the film does a wonderful job of using the dark shadows of noir to give Richard Basehart a chilling edge while telling a stripped-down, short and to-the-point story. Strictly from a film appreciation and art standpoint, It's a good film and a cult classic that stands up to the best A-list films. Yes, it even competes with Hitchcock's Spellbound. Spellbound is mostly a talky psycho thriller with the tension coming from the minds of the characters. He Walked by Night is also about one man almost fighting against himself, but the film brilliantly interweaves action and mental tension. I think that balance sets it apart from other low-budget noirs, which is somewhat redundant since noir was born out of lower film budgets and creating what you could with the lighting and cast available. Like other great noirs, He Walked by Night turned budget disadvantages into a fine classic. I highly recommend He Walked by Night. Thanks for watching. Hi, welcome to the legal wing of Perchance to Read, where I read one word or legal term and quickly break it down for trial watchers. As I say each time, there's no focus on any one trial in this series, just the trial words. And as always, nothing in this video is intended to be legal advice to anyone about anything. Okay, let's jump right in. Imagine a world where anyone can be detained indefinitely without trial, without evidence, and without a chance to prove their innocence. Or imagine a completely fair trial with circumstantial evidence that swirls in just the right way to make an innocent person look guilty in an honest court of law in front of a well-intentioned jury or trier of fact. Habeas corpus can be powerful enough to overcome those bad odds. Habeas corpus, the great writ, the key to any unjust cell door when nothing else will open it, a piece of paper that has the power to set an innocent person free seemingly against all odds. When you think about it, habeas corpus both acknowledges that no criminal justice system is perfect and also aims to perfect a criminal justice system by returning to a locked up person who should otherwise be free their liberty. Habeas corpus is Latin for "you shall have the body." It literally means deliver the body, which is just a fancy way to say hand over the prisoner, let them out of jail. The practice of habeas corpus first appeared in the year 1215 through language in the Magna Carta that said, "No man shall be arrested or imprisoned except by the lawful judgment of his peers and by the law of the land." In other words, a jury of one's peers determining guilt or innocence based on legitimate laws on the books. Sound familiar? Habeas corpus came into existence as a vehicle to counterbalance the king's, quote, divine right to incarcerate people, end quote. By the 1600s, though, habeas corpus was used to free those also incarcerated by constables and other law enforcers. In fact, modern-day habeas corpus petitions are captioned as the defendant versus the warden, and not the defendant versus the state or federal government. So it's not the people versus Jones or Jones versus the people. If Jones is incarcerated in a prison where Smith is the warden, Jones's habeas corpus petition would be captioned Jones versus Smith. Sometimes the prisoner will use the name of the Secretary of the Department of Corrections for the jurisdiction where the prisoner is incarcerated, but it's common to see the warden's name appear on the other side of the V in the caption. Sometimes a petitioner may also use "in Ray Jones on habeas corpus." Again, I mention this to emphasize that habeas corpus is about incarceration and a demand to set the body free if that body should be free. While habeas corpus ensures accountability and prevents the abuse of power by authorities, its real power is in the way it gives individuals the ability to initiate proceedings in a court of law to challenge the legality of their detention. That last point is crucial. Imagine if an unfairly incarcerated person had to wait for the authorities to discover their error and work to reverse it. That person could be waiting a long while or, well, forever. The extraordinary power of habeas corpus lies in the incarcerated individual's ability to initiate the process for reversing the error, to wave the flag from their prison cell and say to a court of law with the authority to do something, "Hey, I shouldn't be in here." That is extraordinary in both senses of the word. It's out of the ordinary, and it's also amazing in its empowering ability. Indeed, within the courts, a petition for a writ of habeas corpus is included in one of the types of petitions for extraordinary relief, because it's different from the ordinary process of an adversarial trial designed to lead to a verdict, but the words extraordinary relief also carry the other meaning, the one that says use of this relief can overcome an otherwise mountainous, even though fair, process. Arguably, the right to habeas corpus transcends traditional boundaries that might define or hem in rights that stem from politics, culture, or geography, and is viewed more as a broad human right that is endemic to human existence, enshrined in the constitutions of many countries as evidence of that belief. To be sure, habeas corpus is systemic in democratic societies, a guaranteed right that is taken for granted to be there if needed. But its universal application demonstrates the wide belief in the fundamental human right to liberty. From Australia to Zimbabwe, and many countries in between, there is a firm, inalienable right to habeas corpus. By the time the United States framed its constitution in the late 1700s, habeas corpus had deep roots in the notions of liberty. So much so that there isn't a provision in the Constitution that proactively, explicitly, grants the right to habeas corpus relief. Instead, Article 1, Section 9, Clause 2 of the U.S. Constitution states, "The privileges of writ of habeas corpus shall not be suspended unless when in cases of rebellion or invasion, the public safety may require it." In other words, the U.S. Constitution describes when habeas corpus can be suspended because the presumption is that habeas corpus is an ongoing privilege to be accessed when needed. It's already there. No need to add it to the Constitution. Of course, there is irony in this. The original U.S. Constitution left in place African slavery, which reveals that the framers, the men who crafted the Constitution, didn't necessarily have a good grasp of what liberty actually meant. They baked one man's ownership of other men into the foundation of the nation, ironically just one clause up from the clause on habeas corpus. Indeed, Article 1, Section 9, Clause 1 discusses the prohibition on the federal government limiting the importation of persons. Yeah, slavery. The very next clause, Clause 2, is the one that discusses when habeas corpus can be suspended. But their ability to grasp and take for granted the privilege of habeas corpus relief, considering their inhumane approach to slavery, almost proves the point that habeas corpus was so much a part of the fabric of freedom that even among men who were ignorant enough to continue on the course of slavery, and who owned slaves themselves in some cases, habeas corpus was something to clearly be included and addressed in the original Constitution. It was like, well, of course we have to have a section on habeas corpus because, well, it's a thing, even if only for some people. It was clearly too ubiquitous by that point to ignore, and all discussion of it is as a pre-existing concept. Since this video is about habeas corpus, I'll leave there the irony of slave owners who perpetrated genocide of indigenous peoples to found a nation on land that wasn't theirs, somehow acknowledging habeas corpus. But it's worth pointing out that the inexplicable juxtaposition exists to emphasize how prevalent habeas corpus must have been by the 1700s. On a different note, it's important to remember that habeas corpus relief is not designed to simply determine whether an individual is innocent and to reverse their conviction in a court of law if they are. Habeas corpus is about unfair incarceration and the overall conditions of confinement. In fact, if an innocent person who is no longer incarcerated, or on parole, or otherwise subject to the oversight of the Department of Corrections wishes to prove their innocence, habeas corpus will not be available to them because they are not incarcerated. Remember, habeas corpus means you shall have the body. But when there's no body to deliver, no incarcerated individual to free, no warden on the other side of the case caption, there's no relief to grant and no ability to file a habeas corpus petition. Instead, the person would need to use other legal processes to establish their innocence. Meanwhile, an admittedly guilty prisoner may nevertheless file a petition for a writ of habeas corpus to challenge their confinement on grounds of innocence. Yes, they can do that. Or on other grounds of unfair or inhumane confinement. For example, if they are being detained in a 5 feet by 5 feet, or for my international audience, 1.5 meters by 1.5 meters cell, wherein they can't stand or lie to full body length, or they are not permitted to bathe, or are deprived of regular meals or medical care. Perhaps they're scheduled by law to be released on a certain date and are nevertheless being detained beyond the term of imprisonment to which they were sentenced. Or they're being detained in a jail without charges being brought, arrested and put in a cell, and never arraigned or permitted to plead not guilty in a court of law before a neutral judicial officer or to seek bail, or maybe they've been transferred to another facility against their wishes. They could be facing unfair deportation. The warden in their prison could be withholding their mail. In other words, habeas corpus can be used to challenge any kind of custody or incarceration that is unfair or unlawful. As with other areas of the law, for example, Miranda versus Arizona, cementing the idea of Mirandizing arrestees, reading them their Miranda rights during police custody that includes interrogation, and saying out loud to them, quote, "You have the right to remain silent," etc., habeas corpus has a landmark case that changed the destiny of criminal defendants in the United States, as you'll see in a moment. Here's what happened. In 1961, one Clarence Earl Gideon was convicted in Florida of breaking and entering a pool hall and stealing some combination of money and drinks. He was sentenced to serve 5 years in prison. After his conviction, Gideon asserted in a habeas corpus petition filed first in Florida that his conviction was unconstitutional and that the Florida Department of Corrections secretary illegally incarcerated him because, at trial, Gideon had requested a defense attorney as an indigent defendant and had been denied counsel by the trial court. The trial court had decided that since Gideon was not on trial for a death penalty offense, he was not entitled to free counsel. Gideon went through the trial without an attorney and was forced to defend himself, and well, we know how that turned out. The Florida Supreme Court, however, denied Gideon's petition for a writ of habeas corpus. In 1962, with nothing to lose and still representing himself, Gideon handwrote a petition to the United States Supreme Court for a writ of certiorari seeking review of the Florida Supreme Court's denial of his petition for a writ of habeas corpus. These are photos of his actual petition. It was just 5 pages long. 5 pages heard around, well, the country, which changed the course of countless lives and still counting. Powerfully, Gideon asserted on page 4 of his petition that because he was, quote, compelled to make his own defense and, quote, incapable adequately of making his own defense, it meant that, quote, petitioner did not plead no contest, but that is what his trial amounted to, end quote. That's pretty raw. He's saying with simple, pencil-scratched language, by refusing to provide an attorney who could have mounted a competent defense, you basically forced me to plead guilty. That's actually a mic drop argument. Somehow, the handwriting and plain language make it all the more powerful for the human simplicity of it. According to page 2, Gideon did attach his earlier denied petition, but that attachment was an exhibit to the petition. The actual petition was just those 5 handwritten pages. Gideon also attached the Florida Supreme Court's brief denial order. No formal opinion had been issued by the Florida Supreme Court, which is common for a summary denial of a petition for extraordinary relief. It's easy to see how the plain petition, the earlier pleading of his case in his Florida petition, and the brief denial order may have grabbed the U.S. Supreme Court's attention for the sheer need for relief for a solitary man behind bars that the petition evoked with its simplistic characteristics. But one can also see how the court could have dismissed the petition as lacking substance. In a win for jurisprudence, in 1962, the U.S. Supreme Court granted Gideon's petition for review of his case, and by the time the court heard the case, a man named Louis Wainwright was the Florida Department of Corrections secretary, and thus was born the famous case of Gideon versus Wainwright. Remember, the caption on a habeas corpus case is the defendant versus the warden or other incarcerating authority. Wainwright had oversight of the corrections department in Florida that incarcerated Gideon, so the caption read, Gideon versus Wainwright, a case that left a massive footprint on American jurisprudence. In a prescient move that almost proved Gideon's case against Wainwright's incarceration of him, the U.S. Supreme Court appointed counsel for Gideon for what now amounted to his petition for habeas corpus relief in the U.S. Supreme Court, reviewing the trial court's failure to appoint counsel for Gideon during the original trial. Before the High Court, in addition to what Gideon noted about the de facto guilty plea, Gideon, in his initial handwritten petition, and later Gideon's appointed counsel, asserted that Gideon's conviction, and therefore his incarceration, were unconstitutional since the Sixth Amendment to the U.S. Constitution guarantees court-appointed free counsel in serious criminal cases if the defendant cannot afford counsel. The U.S. Supreme Court agreed with Gideon and overturned his conviction. He wasn't immediately freed, though. Instead, he won the right to a new trial. In his second trial, he was acquitted, meaning he was found not guilty and set free. The jury was out for just 1 hour of deliberations before finding Gideon not guilty. Beyond Gideon's freedom, the decision in Gideon versus Wainwright had lasting impact that continues to this day, and that is embedded in habeas corpus and criminal defense jurisprudence throughout the United States. The immediate impact was that soon after the decision in Gideon versus Wainwright, 2,000 indigent defendants in Florida who had been denied counsel at trial were set free. The more wide-ranging impact was that the breadth and depth of the public defender system in America expanded drastically after Gideon versus Wainwright, for once the U.S. Supreme Court guaranteed counsel for any indigent criminal defendant facing serious charges, it necessitated a massive system for providing free counsel in every corner of America. Every jurisdiction has some version of a public defender system. Today, the notion that someone would be forced to go to trial facing serious criminal charges without an attorney representing them is unfathomable. It's actually laughable. Not in real life, not on TV would anybody believe it. We would say, "Where's the defendant's lawyer?" In fact, criminal defendants who wish to represent themselves have to establish to the court that they are up to the task. Otherwise, the court will require that they proceed with appointed counsel. So we've come full circle from Gideon begging for a lawyer to defendants having to fight to go it alone. Even those who represent themselves are often provided with a standby attorney to guide them in the courtroom. Representation by counsel of indigent criminal defendants is baked into American jurisprudence, and for that we can thank Gideon versus Wainwright and one compelling 5-page handwritten petition for a writ of habeas corpus filed by a man who wouldn't stand for or sit through 5 years in prison for a de facto guilty plea he hadn't actually entered. Habeas corpus, the great writ. The ability to initiate the process that sets one free if one is illegally incarcerated or otherwise facing unfair conditions of confinement. It bears repeating, nothing in this video is intended to be legal advice to anyone about anything. Thanks for watching.